girlfriend killed herself tonight. Huh? Is that a coincidence? No, because the same girl who I came downtown to see was dead too. That's because they're the same person. They're both dead. I couldn't believe that.
Crap, mega crap.
I couldn't stop long enough to tell her goodbye that I was sorry.
I'm going through. I just can't smile without you.
Where's that?
I don't know. They're trajectory headings for multiple impact re-entry vehicles.
What does that mean?
I don't know, but it's great.
Oh,
Boy,
kablooey.
an explosion of
blackness.
entertainment and
Be careful.
vitality
Okay,
this
there you
week on the Cinemaniacs. Because I'm Mark.
I'm Tom.
And we are
The
the
Cinemaniacs.
Cinemaniacs. Again.
Hence the name.
Yeah, the Cinemaniacs.
Yes.
So, how you been?
I've been okay.
Oh, good.
Okay. I'm glad you were addressing me. And how have you
Yes.
been?
We'll get
It'll
to
take
that.
a while to
Yeah.
find that out
Yeah.
because
Movies at CheshireTV.org.
he said it.
So, a very light load this week.
Yes, it is, as you can tell.
And as if you watch this fine program, you'll know that I'm talking to them, but looking at you. We
I don't watch
tend
this
to spend the first 20 minutes of the show in the first movie.
Yep, that's
And
true.
the further down we get on our list of
Probably
films,
not this time, though.
the shorter the today we have plenty of time to talk about everything.
Yes.
So if you would care to begin, I know you were looking forward to this film,
Oh,
and I don't
yes.
want to be the one to take away the joy, and I'd like to think the humilosity of letting you introduce it.
It's that kind of relationship that we have. But Nia Vardalos is back with all of her repartee and reportage. And it's been a while, and the families have been kind of drifting apart, as families tend to do. So an event brings everybody back together, and the festivities abound in a bigger and fatter and an even Greekier way in My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. That's about the level of it, I think. You haven't seen the first one, right?
Correct.
And it was quite a while ago. I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was a good time ago. So strange that we're bringing this back.
Hugely popular, the original.
Yeah, very-
It's like-
absolutely.
I think it's still like the #1 indie comedy of all time or something like that. It was huge.
And again, clever. The first one certainly was pretty cleverly written. I jokingly said, and you can go back and find in the vaults of
In the
Ch-
archives,
of
we
the
have it.
Cinemaniacs. All that was really missing, in my opinion, was something to blow up in the first one, because this is clearly, sorry to say it, a chick flick. And even this one I didn't, the first one was, and even this one I didn't think had a lot aimed at the guys, but going into it, you know that. I don't think this in any way, shape, or form purports to be for everybody. I think it's directed at a particular segment of the population, ladies, and even a particular segment, clearly, of the Greek people who come from Greece or of that heritage. And it certainly plays out to that, and I don't think that in a negative way. I remember from the first one, I saw it once in the theaters and once on video, it being innocuous enough. This one's a little bit more blunt and a little bit more beat you over the head with
Blunt force comedic trauma.
some humor. But, and I don't remember the original well enough to catch a lot of the connections, I think. I recognized some of the characters and some of the situations, and I thought it did a good enough job. I'll be interested to hear from you whether you felt lost at any time with anything. But as a sequel, and particularly one that's been separated for quite a length of time, I thought this did a pretty good job of bringing stuff back together. It's innocuous enough. There's certainly nothing offensive or anything in it. I just am not a big fan of the original, so I don't think I was the ideal audience for this. But I think the people who liked the first one are going to enjoy this one just as much.
This is where you wish one of us was a big fan of this, because this is an occasion where I'm watching this on behalf of the people who have never seen the original before.
Right, okay.
So my opinion is what I think of it, and then it's what might somebody who's never seen think of it. So I never saw the original, as I'm fond of saying on this program, because I didn't have to. Didn't look good to me. Looked not my cup of joe.
Right.
So this was not subtle. Some very, very broad performances, let's say. And I'm not talking about that there are ladies performing in this film. I mean, it was
Right.
playing to the back row of the theater.
Right.
So I was dreading going to see this, because from the trailers it looked terrible to me. I didn't find it awful. I just found it, as I said, very broad, not my style of comedy, and boy, is this movie made for people who are Greek.
Yes.
If I could get a dime, if somebody was next to me and they handed me a dime every time the word Greek was spoken aloud in this film, I'd be walking out with huge pockets going jingle jangle, having a hard time walking up the aisle, looking like I drank way too many Dr. Peppers. So that was a little annoying to me, actually. I'm like, we get it. They're proud of their heritage. That being said, Keene has a very large Greek population, and I do wonder if this is going to play well for those folks. There were people there sitting toward the back. I tend to sit toward the front. There were moments where there was a good amount of laughter in this film.
Out loud. Okay.
Not a lot of moments. And I think some of that was knowing cultural laughter, which was kind of interesting to experience. It was like when I went to see The Mermaid with a mostly Chinese audience a few weeks back. That was kind of cool for people who are of the ethnicity who the film is aimed at, getting stuff that go over my head, or getting it a lot more. And when you can get it in the theater, it's nice, isn't it? So I didn't like this a whole lot.
Okay.
It was okay. I can't say, I think I smirked maybe twice. It was just so broad. It was so not my style. I felt a couple of times like maybe there were things that were referring back to the original film that would mean more to you if you had seen that. But otherwise, I didn't feel really lost at all with this. I mean, they do a good job about setting up everybody's relationships really like in the first minute or so of the movie. And it's not heavy-handed, it's not flashbacks, it's not a lot of voiceover. It's more over, you know, here's this person's day, they're a tight-knit family, so they see everybody in their family, and you get a really quick flash of what everybody's like.
Right.
Andrea Martin is in it, who I generally like a lot from the old SCTV days. She was amazing on that. Pretty broad in this one. But hey, if people, like I say, if people liked the original, I would imagine they would like this too, because it is, to my knowledge, everybody from the original back again, and you know their story a decade or so later. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay.
Speaking of epic battles to save the world, which may or may not involve Greeks. Up next, you may have heard about this film. Who are you going to call when badness is happening in two of the largest cities in America, and your two greatest champions are at each other's throat? Well, you call Batman versus Superman for the dawn, excuse me, of justice.
Boom, and we're out.
So can I just make this really short?
Yeah.
Plastic Man comes in, kills them both. We didn't expect that at all.
That's right.
So I was not looking
That was
forward
a stretch, though. So. Thank you.
Movies at CheshireTV.org. I was not expecting to not like this.
Okay.
I really didn't like Man of Steel. I grew up on the Christopher Reeve Superman films and the George Reeves TV series. I like a Superman who smiles. Call me crazy, who's a nice guy.
And we'll get to that.
Who saves people and stops natural disasters and isn't brooding and bellyaching about his parents all the time. I also am one of the few people who didn't like the Christopher Nolan Batman movies.
Okay, and I did. So
everybody else did, so I realized that. So I was like, another Batman movie that's going to be my parents. Fine, we get it. And a Superman movie where he's all broody and angry and all that. So, because this is from the director of Man of Steel. This is a pretty direct sequel to Man of Steel, actually.
Yeah, it really is.
It wasn't totally clear to me until after it had happened, but the opening moments of this film are essentially taking place during the end of Man of Steel. So this sort of, the two mesh together. This, among many other things, weren't totally clear to me while I was watching it until I thought about it or read about it afterwards. Or maybe far into the movie, it was made clear about what was going on at the beginning of the movie.
Okay.
We have Ben Affleck as Batman this time out, and we have the same actor we had the last time, Henry Cavill, as Superman, who's fine, I think. If he was a little happier, I'd be cool with that. And
everybody's so brooding, and just to jump in, my problem is there are only like 3 lines that are funny in this entire film, and they come 2/3 of the way and then almost at the very end.
DC is trying to be dark and brooding and serious, and that's fine, that's cool, but really, all the time, that's it? So the Batman versus Superman thing, why are they fighting? I'm not going to tell you why they're fighting. Go see the movie. But what they came up with to make them fight was interesting to me. It wasn't just, you know, I assumed it would be like Superman finds red kryptonite, turns bad, and Batman has to stop it. That's not what it is. So the 2 leads were fine. A lot of people have been praising Affleck for his Batman, for his Bruce Wayne. He doesn't really do a lot as Bruce Wayne. He's kind of stone-faced for the most part. I think what is done with Batman and Bruce Wayne in this is kind of cool. We get a new Alfred in the form of Jeremy Irons, who's very cool, who's technically a butler, but you don't see him buttle at all in this film. He's more like the Q.
Well, and he's even an antagonist almost to Bruce, which is unusual.
To a degree,
I think.
And that's interesting. Amy Adams in the cast of Man of Steel is back, and to cut this short, because this is where we usually spend 45 minutes on a movie, though we can. I was okay with this ultimately, and it probably was because I went in with the lowest expectations possible, that it was going to be awful and unwatchable, and it wasn't, for me it wasn't either. It suffers from being too long. It's about 2.5 hours. It suffers from being a little unclear as to what's going on a lot of the time, because again, they're trying to do so much, and this exists so that DC can finally get its, hey, yeah, we have an Avengers-like team too. Yeah. Their Justice League movie. This is
Sinister
really,
Six is coming out soon, and
the Suicide Squad is. We saw a trailer for that right in front of this. So you get Batman, you get Superman, you get Wonder Woman in a small role. You get hints about the Flash, Cyborg, and Aquaman as being part of this impending team. And the Wonder Woman you see a good amount of in the film, and when she finally shows up as Wonder Woman, which isn't until the end of the movie, she's her alter ego for a lot of this. I have to admit, I thought it was really cool. I got a little bit of a goosebump thing.
Okay.
I'm like, yeah. And my first thought was, so the Wonder Woman movie, is that next week? Is that coming out next week? Because I'm ready for that right now.
Right.
Apparently it's like June 2017 or something. DC has this ridiculously... I think Marvel does too. But DC has this ridiculously ambitious slate of when all these movies are going to come out. And I looked at that. This was like a year or two ago. They had this list going to like 2020 or 25. And I'm like, 2 of those tank, and the dry erase marker, the dry erase is coming out, because none of that's going to happen. But anyway, I thought this was fine for what it was. If you just want to go in for a thrill ride, as movies more and more are now than anything else, and not a lot going on upstairs. Some very cool imagery. Say what you will about Zack Snyder, but he can craft some very lovely freeze frames in his films. Like if you paused it, you'd be like, "That's gorgeous."
Right.
My beef is always with action sequences in modern movies. They were not too bad in this one, I will say. There's a couple of Batman action sequences that I was really impressed that. There's one weird, hard to explain, hard to figure out flash forward that happens with Bruce Wayne, where Batman is fighting all these like futuristic guys, and I was shocked. It's a wide shot that does a slow 360 when you see him take all these guys out, and I was just stunned that I was being allowed to see what was going on in an action movie in 2016. There's another fight in a warehouse that's pretty well choreographed with Batman, but it's Batman who wears all black fighting guys who are all clad in black, so you're losing the limbs, so to speak. You're like, well, I see he's beating guys up, but I want to be impressed by the fisticuffs and the choreography and stuff. So in the end, now that I've talked too long, overall I would say I liked this. I was impressed with it. I hope it bodes well for future films in this series in terms of style. And maybe the sun will shine again on the DC universe, and somebody will get a puppy and smile in one of these damn movies.
That was one of my biggest problems, was everything was so grim. And I always I used to work at DC, close association with Batman. And so I kind of went into this with lots of chips going against the director, because I worked pretty closely with Alan Moore on The Watchmen, and while I happened to like V for Vendetta, Alan hated everything. I didn't like Watchmen, so I'm going into Snyder's films thinking, you just don't know how to treat any of these characters. I know a lot about Batman, grew up with Superman and all those kinds of things. Never liked Cavill's version of Superman because he was kind of so glum. So I went into this just thinking, man, there's just not much of a way I'm going to be able to like this. I also went in thinking, how can you convince me, believably, that all of these people are against Superman? I thought they did a pretty good job of that. I bought it. We then spent a little time with Clark and Lois, who are actually a couple. And they're talking about, I'm just trying to be good, blah, blah, blah. So I really bought that, and I was happy that they got that done for me. I was disappointed. Ultimately, you're right, it's way too long. You could trim a good half hour, 45 minutes out of this thing.
But the director's cut, if I haven't said this already, will be 30 minutes longer.
So that must explain.
So anyway.
I agree completely. You said off air, I'm going to steal your line. It's really nice, 2/3 of the way through, when Bruce Wayne, Batman, has given Diana, Wonder Woman, this file for a picture that she was looking at, and then she sorts through all of these things that LexCorp has done all of this background on super metahumans, And so here's where we see, oh, here's the clip for Wonder Woman, here's the clip for Aquaman, blah, blah, blah. And she clicks through all of those for us.
And they have the little like icons
It
for
was
each
nice
of
of, like,
these so far unnamed superheroes.
Right.
Yeah.
So lots of silly little stuff that you have to sit through as you're right that they're so clearly building up to many movies coming. Taking this then just as kind of its own film, I did kind of like that. First of all, we spent like half an hour in backstory. I couldn't believe that. We talked about how the Hunger Games and some of these other films, they just kick right in, and they just, if you haven't seen stuff, too bad, and you get moving.
If you don't know Superman and Batman's story by now, tough.
Did I need to see, yeah, as you say,
Yeah.
you know, little Bruce falling down the well and everything again? No, just start it up. And so I think you could trim a good half an hour out of this film, and I think I would like it more. And you can still keep the mysterious little, here's what's coming up in all of the 8 new movies coming out. I was disappointed personally, and I think this is a fair comment because this is clearly a film for fans. I don't think if you're at least not even familiar and where have you been living, on what other planet, Krypton, have you been living where you don't know Superman or Batman. But
That might be people who like go outdoors and exercise.
you said, who have lives.
I mean,
perhaps.
I've heard there are people like that, but I don't know any.
Right. So Superman's a tough character. In DC, I don't mean to keep building my background in, but I was at DC when we did a complete renovation. John Byrne came in and did a total rehaul on all of the characters, because how exciting can a character be if he's just invulnerable and ultimately powerful and everything? They really toned Superman down. But that was still, I think, starting to be one of the problems, that unless you brought in another Kryptonian character, nothing's going to happen to Superman. So he's kind of a boring character. I thought their treatment of Batman, for me, Batman was all about the cleverness and the gadgets and everything that he constructs in clever ways to defeat the villains. Now, there's an interesting thing. This is basically, for those of you who are familiar with the comics, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. A 4-part comic book from the 80s that is just terrific. And if you're familiar with that, you know how Batman's going to try to beat Superman. He does a little bit of that, but most of the rest of this stuff is just Batman beating people up and not doing clever Batman stuff. So I was a little disappointed in that. In the long run, I thought for fans and for fans of the films or the comic books, this is perfectly acceptable. Too long, but I enjoyed Affleck's version of both Batman and Bruce Wayne. As you say, I don't think they gave him a lot to do, and he is too brooding. I hope now that this is all out of everybody's systems, you can see them being real people. You can see Clark when he's back, and come on, Clark's going to be back one way or the other, not to give away anything at the end.
Can I talk about the ending without saying what the ending was? Too
Sure,
late?
please do.
Okay, so this movie ends about 5
It
times.
sure does.
And it was leading up to it. Something happens, and you're like, well, if you've been alive more than a few years, you know that this isn't really
Right.
going to hold. But something happens, and the movie looks like it's going to end, and I'm like, wow, that's gutsy to end it that way. To say, in terms of this movie, this is the way the world is right now.
Right.
And they couldn't do that.
Right.
They had to do, oh, maybe that's not the case. And I was like, oh, come on. Because we know it's not the case.
Yeah.
But still, give me a movie, like one of the Bond films, what was it, Skyfall. He gets theoretically killed at the beginning of the movie.
Right.
But it's like, we're 2 minutes into the movie, he's not dead.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you had put that scene at the end of the last movie and said, he's dead.
Right. That would have
People
been
would be
pretty
like,
cool.
whoa, that's really ballsy. But if you put it at the beginning. So anyway, what this movie did at the end, other than having too many endings, was you could have literally trimmed like 10 frames off this movie and I would have liked it better. Just because it was like, be definitive about something. What did you think about Lex Luthor in this film?
I thought Eisenberg, whom I've liked in many films, just so wonderfully perfect in Zombieland. The Social Network was just ideal, but he's usually, and Zombieland is a different one, but I think all of his other films, he's way over the top for me. And he was way too over the top for me in this one, not just as Luthor, but just the character was so constantly on. I'm wondering, he's constantly Breaking Bad. He's got to be on something offset, the actor, because he's so constantly on. And that's direction too. That's Snyder not either being willing to say, tone it down, or being aware of that. So I thought the character was way too on for me.
Especially at the end. It was almost laughable what he was doing.
Now, fun to finally see Luthor the way I think we kind of all know Luthor toward the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk about shoving in our face, ooh, sequel, and multiple ones. Yeah, the whole bit toward the end was a bit much. I was curious. I found the overall film, interesting in the way it blended Batman and Luthor so much,
That
which
was
was
interesting.
never a connection in the comic books. And even as a matter of fact, there was an interesting line when, about halfway through, Luthor throws a big bash and invites everybody. Clark shows up there, Bruce shows up there, and so they get a chance to meet. And when Bruce Wayne and Luthor meet, Bruce says, "Lex, how are you?" As if they're old buddies. Now, I got the sense that maybe that's not really the case, but there was that interesting connection. So I thought a lot of the subtext that was going on throughout this film was really interesting. The text itself, with Batman versus Superman over it, it took forever for them to get battling, and some of the battles I thought were believable. So I gave it a 6 going out. That I didn't think it was a very good movie on any bounds, but it was certainly livable. I'm hoping as they move forward, they'll spend a little bit more time, humanize some of these characters. No pun intended with Clark, but that's always his goal, is to be kind of human, and make them a little bit more fun.
I'd like to get solo films again from these characters. And geez, even the Marvel movies are guilty of doing a solo
Sure they
film,
are.
but like it's Captain America, but there's Iron Man, there's
Right.
this guy. And just let's explore the character.
Right.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
And that's I think, to interrupt.
No, please.
Not only what worked so well. Early on, you had all of the Superman, Batmans, and everything, and there were all these superheroes. The real unique thing about Marvel, when Stan Lee took over, was bringing in Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and you spent equal time with them. Spider-Man's out fighting villains. Peter Parker has to make the rent due, and his aunt is ill, and you get these real humanizing elements. And when they started doing that, particularly with Iron Man 3, which I think is a wonderful film about Tony Stark having to deal with his realization that there are gods in the universe, it's the personal elements that make these superhero characters interesting. And that's what this one really didn't deal with. And I think you're right that let's deal with them. I'd like to see that.
Just a little more character downtime.
Right.
Like the Bond films. One of my favorite moments in contemporary Bond cinema is Tomorrow Never Dies, the second Pierce Brosnan movie.
Right.
There's a moment where he's waiting for somebody to show up in his hotel room. It's not a very long scene, it's moments. But he's sitting there in his tuxedo shirt with a bottle of hooch, and he's just waiting. And it's moments, but it's just like, and then something happens. These movies now are so, and yet still manage to be boring sometimes. So up next, that's all that's in theaters currently. That's not all that's in theaters. That's all that was new in Keen Cinemas this week currently. Now we switch over to that which you would watch at home in the comfort of your own home via the device of your choice. First of which is the following starring people.
Yes. Many of them, if you would like. Quentin is back, bringing us mayhem and blood and murder and everything that might thus occur, with a whole group of folks, one of them being Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell is bringing Jennifer Jason Leigh back he's a bounty hunter, and he's going to get some bucks because she's one of those bad ladies that you don't want to mess with. And he's going to end up in a place in a huge snowstorm, and you don't want to be with a whole lot of these folks. It can be dangerous because they are the Hateful Eight.
Fun is doing something useful around the house.
You will not be seeing it in glorious
No,
70mm at home.
That's true.
Although I believe the Somerville Theater in Boston still has it in
Really?
70s. So
talk about an
well, you can.
anticipated movie. People
Yes.
were waiting to see this one.
Tarantino has a rabid fan base.
Sure does.
He has critical respect. He has the backing of the Weinstein Company.
He
who
can
will
draw anybody. Everybody wants to work with him.
You understand that what he does is he makes big budget, trashy movies.
Yes.
I hope everybody realizes that, because when Django came out,
knowingly so and intentionally.
oh yeah, these are all his movies are based on the kind of garbage I like.
Yeah.
And people were when Django came out, people were like, "This is an amazing dissection and contemplation of race relations." I'm like, "It's Mandingo.
Right.
He's remaking a trash classic,
Right.
but with A-list actors." They happen to be racists, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm a big fan of spaghetti westerns.
Yep.
This is his take on the spaghetti western. He went to the degree of getting Ennio Morricone to do the score.
Academy Award winner.
For which he won an Academy Award.
Yep.
Even though I believe a large part of the score was written for John Carpenter's The Thing back in the early 80s and it was never used.
Right.
So,
Why not?
Morricone couldn't finish this score in time, didn't have time, so
Here, take this.
basically it's like Tarantino always does. He has to lift something that came from a movie he liked once,
Right.
Or contemporary odd musical choices. So I went into this in the theater thinking, ooh, the vistas, panoramic 70 millimeter. This is going to be gorgeous. It's going to look like The Great Silence. It's going to look like all kinds of spaghetti westerns I love. And all those exteriors are pretty much in the first 10 minutes.
Got a little of that, yeah.
And then it's a bunch of people in a room talking. It really feels a lot like a filmed play. Like I wouldn't be shocked if at some point somebody didn't turn this into a stage play because it would work really well.
You're right.
So overall, I like Tarantino stuff. I get a little annoyed sometimes at his stuff. Sometimes the dialogue feels overtly written and phony.
Okay.
Sometimes he overuses profanity to the point where it feels fake. Like I know people who swear a lot; they don't swear that much. So there's a little of that going on in here. But phenomenal cast, who for the most part I thought were very good, and it looks really good. The cinematography is very good.
It's beautiful.
Of these guys and lady sitting in chairs in a room. Interesting set. You really feel like you know the space by the time the movie's over with. Very crude and brutal at times in dialogue and action. There's a flashback scene with Sam Jackson where something happens that I thought was going a bit too far in trying to be edgy, but whoop, there it is. So overall, I liked The Hateful Eight.
Okay.
I thought maybe it was a bit too long. It's in 2 acts, and the second act begins with a sudden voiceover that we haven't heard before by Tarantino, I realized later, which is really weird because it's all these Old West people talking like Old West people, and then it's a guy who comes on who's like, so while you were away, I'm like, what who's this? Why is he talking like a guy who just walked off the street at the mall? What's going on here? That really took me out of it a lot. And the intermission was made for actually, if you see it on video, and when I saw it in the theater, it sort of dips to black and comes back. For 70 millimeter, it was an actual intermission because it was a longer presentation, and he's trying to replicate the old roadshow cinematic events of past. And cool. That's nice that because he has a whim and Weinstein will do anything he wants them to. People were able to see a 70 millimeter presentation with nice programs and all this. None of which means squat on video, but I'm happy for the people who got that experience. So I liked The Hateful Eight overall. It wasn't the Western I was expecting, other than that it's got Western trappings. I didn't think Jennifer Jason Leigh was all that great in it, despite all the accolades and nominations she got. It seemed a little bit over the top and way too profane to seem natural to me. But overall, I think if you like Tarantino, it's worth watching. If you like Westerns, probably not. If you're a normal moviegoer, I don't think you're going to get this movie. I think you're going to find it too long, too talky, and too gruesome. I mean, just like what I refer to as normal people. But I don't know. I look forward to seeing what he's doing next. I almost think it might be another Western. I'm not sure. I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
I'll agree that I went into this with 2 expectations. One was unbelievably gorgeous vistas, primarily I think because of the trailers, and I knew it was shot in 70.
Most of the vistas are in that trailer.
Yes, and so I love those. They're just beautifully shot. I'm a cinematographer by trade, and just eating those up, just loved them. And then you're right, we get to, after about half an hour, we get into this single location, this kind of outpost where all of these people congregate, and you're there for the rest of the film. Often I find that interesting. Hitchcock will do that with a lifeboat or something like that. And so I kind of would have thought I would have enjoyed it, but this is too long. This needs to be trimmed by about half an hour. It is very, very talky. And this is Tarantino, and so I don't blame him for this because this is his style. But he'll go along with long sequences of talk, and then you'll get, as you said, just expulsions of 4-letter words just to be there, I think. And then he'll set it up to where there's like 30 seconds or a minute of unbelievable violence and then nothing for a while. And so it's like, oh, he's writing along to, it's been a while since she's had her nose broken. Better bust her nose. Speaking of Jennifer Jason Leigh, whom I usually like, I too thought she was way over the top. I heard her interviewed, and she was very proud that what she said was, well, this is a great role for women's rights and equality because I proved that I can take a hit as well as any man. Well, that's great for women on film. Congratulations. I thought
Bridesmaids was a wonderful advancement in female comedy because this time a female took a dump in a sink.
Right, exactly. Wasn't that nice? So overall, this is Tarantino likes to show how cute he is with all of his films. I too was expecting a Western, and this isn't. They happen to have as you say, I think the trappings.
It's kind of, in a sense, it's kind of the thing as a Western.
Kinda. Yeah, you're right. You're right. In many respects, because you don't know who's who,
who's good and who's bad.
That's an interesting. I'd not thought of that comparison.
And Kurt Russell's there, and the score for the thing is there. And,
That's very funny. So I think you're right. If you're a fan of Tarantino's earlier stuff, or if you're a fan of Westerns, I think you're going to enjoy this. It is too long, but I only saw this in the theaters. I remember it very well. But I went in with a chip on my shoulder for kind of all of these things, and then I saw them played out. So I think I want to watch it again because I respect him as a filmmaker so much, and I think I might, if I can, forgive the overt language and violence, I think I might, for want of a better term, enjoy it more.
I was before we started, I was saying the same thing. Is I think this will play better for me a second time, which I always hate when people say that you have to see it twice. I'm like, no, if it sucks once, I don't want to go back. But because I expected something so different, now I think if I watched it again, I could meet it on its own terms.
Right.
And the cast is so good.
Everybody's
and it does
terrific.
look so good, and
You
the
had
music is so
a couple
good.
of surprise cameos that I just laughed out loud when you saw a
I'm like,
couple
does he
of
have
them.
to be in everything?
Yes, but it was great that the way we dealt with one of these particular cameos,
Yes.
because it's what everybody wants to do, I think. So
And
anyway,
makes sweet, sweet love to Samuel L. Jackson. So, speaking of hits to
hitting
the face,
your head up against the wall. Yes.
Yes. Up next, we have a film taking on tackling the serious issue of football violencia, with Will Smith as a doctor who is looking into the issue of football concussion.
So we turn the projector, turn the film knob, and see 6 exciting still features.
Oh, that hurt my head.
So in
Sorry.
lieu of talking about a film neither of us have seen, we'll just continue the conversation. So
Yes.
I haven't actually watched Daredevil, the Netflix show
Right,
yet,
exactly.
but I hear very good things
It's
about
on
it.
UHD, so.
Is it? And
if
I
you
hear
happen to
that
have-
the action choreography is like really good.
I started it. It was interesting, but
We're not going to talk about concussion.
I
by the
want to
way.
see the suit, and you don't see the red suit
the Daredevil?
for like the first 6 episodes.
Well, it's
so-
like all superhero stuff now, where it's like we're going to tone the colors down so much that
Right.
it might as well be black leather.
How did, speaking of Batman
We're
versus
really not going
Superman,
to talk about concussion.
how did Martha make his suit?
I don't know, but I noticed that we're really not going to talk about it. The S
Yeah.
because we didn't watch it. The S in this new Superman movie, it looks like it's bedazzled. Like the light
Yes,
hits it
it's all
sometimes.
shiny.
and
Well,
I'm
there's
like,
a cool shot.
Ooh, it's dazzling.
There's a cool shot, and this is in the trailer, where he like comes slamming down. He does a lot of that, boom, and slamming down, which is cool. But then he's walking through this dark corridor, and in one there's like 4 frames where only the S shines in the darkness.
That's cool.
It's really pretty cool. So
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's a seamstress for the
in the comics,
CIA or something.
she had him use his heat vision.
I never knew that.
He'd go tss, and he'd go tss, and burn a little thing, and then she could sew it. So
yeah, we're not going to talk about concussion, just
Anyway.
so you know, because we didn't see it.
Didn't
but
see it.
I heard wonderful things about it, and it actually is a movie I'd like to see. This is what happens when it doesn't play locally, and we don't get screeners.
Right.
So write your local congressman and ask them to get us screeners from all the major studios, and we'll talk about everything on time.
There you
okay?
go.
So up next is another film that you'll have to stay tuned. Did we see it or not?
You never know, but we can tell you about it. Keanu Reeves plays New York City police officer whose partner is killed, and by golly, he's going to figure out who did it. He has this suspicion that this young Italian girl who doesn't speak a whole lot of English, strangely enough, so there's a communication issue going on, might have seen something that she's kind of unwilling to discuss. He has to track her down, and when they find that out, we're going to know that the killer will soon be exposed.
Switch on, press talk button, and you broadcast from room to room.
Reeves isn't certainly. Is he an A-lister anymore? I think he's an A-B-lister anymore, I think. But he's interesting. I like the guy, and I'm hoping, I'm not trying to push my my new purchase, but I got a new UHD TV, so it's super. And
This is 4K for people who've
yes,
heard the buzzwords.
man, he looks old. And Walter and I were watching, and I think they really did an effort to put makeup on him and stuff like that to make him look that old. I'm hoping he's not aging that quickly, because I can't imagine what I look like right now. That being said, but he's good in these kinds of things. He's no great actor, but he's good at looking troubled and having an issue that he has to face. Ana de Armas is this young woman who has these, who saw something. He knows she saw something. He's trying to track her down. And this thing is almost supernatural, actually, because she sees all these visions. She sees these very bizarre, to me, troubling angels who just kind of stand there and look at her. Something very biblical occurs to her about halfway. We find this out about halfway through the film. So this is a very strange mixture of contemporary crime whodunit and very bizarre supernatural evangelical film that gets very much into the root of Catholicism. And so I thought it was very, very curious. She just bowled me over as being a wonderful actress. I don't recall having seen her anyplace before, but boy, I hope we see more of her because she was just terrific. Reeves was good. This really held my curiosity until the very, very end. And then the explanation for all of this stuff is kind of out of the blue, and what we always used to call a tomato surprise. It's like you can have things come across, and then all of a sudden you get hit in the face with a tomato. That's not clever. That's just, surprise, out of the blue you got hit in the face with a tomato. So this one was like that. But fortunately, that's only like the last 10 or 15 minutes. If this was like X number of dollars, it was pretty cheap as an Amazon rental. I think if you like Reeves, if you like unusual, curious detective thrillers, I think this is very much worth a watch.
I'll make it a point to watch this.
Okay.
Solely because you gave me the DVD when you walked in.
That's the kind of power that I have.
We lend. So, finally, at long last, 30 years later, everybody's favorite man-child from the 80s is back once again traversing this great land of ours in search of true friendship in Pee-wee's Big Holiday.
Looking people in the whole world. Potato Head people look different every time you make them.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I chose, as I often do, to go to the Alamo Drafthouse Theater in Yonkers, New York, to go see this. I've fallen in love with this place. They show really cool, weird screenings and one-off stuff, and they were running this for free on the big screen.
Cool.
And I figured this is not meant for theaters. This is straight to Netflix,
right,
which may say something about it or it may not. And I was like, wow, cool. For free, I can go and see this in a theater, which is not something you can really do anywhere other than if you have one of these theaters near you, and that's the closest. So I drove 3.5 hours. I saw that, and I saw an old 40s movie called Gun Crazy, which was really cool to see. Overall, I liked this. When I first heard they were doing this, I thought, it's a bit late for that.
Right.
And then when I heard the plot, I was like, that sounds exactly like Pee-wee's Big Adventure to me.
Yes, doesn't it, though?
This isn't as similar to Pee-wee's Big Adventure as I expected it would be.
I agree.
In broad strokes, it is. You get him waking up in his house and all the Rube Goldberg devices of how his house works, which I thought was pretty funny and clever.
That goes on for like 5 minutes.
Goes on for a long time.
Wow.
And it's him, meeting wacky characters coast to coast and all that. But ultimately, it's very segmented, I guess I would say. It's all these little places he stops and has these weird little interactions with weird little people. It's got a really interesting look to it. It doesn't look... Tim Burton directed the original. I'm not sure who directed this one. This is written by Pee Wee Herman, produced by, what's his name, who makes the movies that are too long that I don't like? Judd Apatow.
Oh, right.
And...
strange connection.
Yeah, and a few familiar faces. The plot basically is that Joe Manganiello from True Blood and the Magic Mike movies rolls in on his hog motorcycle, and he and Pee-wee become like best friends immediately. Joe invites Pee-wee to his birthday party in New York City, so it's Pee-wee trying to go there to be with his new best friend, and there's this Faster Pussycat Kill subplot, which made me happy. The three women on the run are the women in Faster Pussycat for the most part. That was interesting to see that in a mainstream movie. Right. Most people still don't know that one. And you see some people who were in, like the woman who played Missy Vaughn in the old Pee-wee's Playhouse show and all the old Pee-wee incarnations since the beginning, is in this movie as the woman who runs the reptile farm. Totally unrecognizable, much older. And I don't know, I thought it was fun. It was much better than I expected. It had moments where I was laughing out loud. The part with the balloon, which goes on for a really long time, I was just laughing through the whole thing. Some of it was really clever, very whimsical, pretty much suitable for all ages. There's all the Pee-wee stuff. There's some stuff that if you're a grown-up, you're going to see that a kid would never read into something. It's not as good as Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Part of that is expectations. You can't go back to that well again and have it be as fresh as it was the first time. Part of it is that he's a little older. He doesn't show his age much at all, but he's a little bit older. And it doesn't have the money and the total creative talent behind it that the original Pee-wee movie did. That was Warner Brothers and Tim Burton. Right. This is an indie production that's picked up by Netflix or funded by Netflix, and I'm not sure who the director was. But overall, I think if you have never seen a Pee Wee Herman anything, it works. It doesn't tie into the original really at all. It doesn't even really follow any chronology. Like it acts as if anything you've seen with him has never happened before. And if you're a huge fan of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, it's probably a disappointment. But for me, I laughed a lot, and I would watch it again.
I think if you're a huge fan of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I'll give you a brief summation.
You'll always have Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Right.
Don't go outside that.
I think you're going to enjoy this because it is so similar. And we're not holding this up to huge criteria that it has to be so terribly original. I started watching this about 2 weeks ago. It was on Netflix, right? I turn it on, and the first 4 or 5 minutes are so bad and so stupid. And I qualify that by saying the first time I watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I just thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I hated it. And all I could do was rant and rave about how awful it was. And my friends just kept liking it so much. And I watched it a couple more times. This shows you how stupid I am. And it got a little bit better.
I kept hitting my head with a hammer.
And I kept
Eventually, I
watching
couldn't feel it anymore.
And it's one of my favorite movies. I get the really goofy, silly humor, and I love it. Big Top Pee-wee was a little step down. For some reason, as I finally get through this bit, it turns out to be a dream. This isn't giving anything away at the very beginning. But
okay, yeah, that was weird.
This alien, he's sitting talking to this ET alien, and the alien looks awful. And this must get back to the fact that they didn't have a lot of money. It's Netflix. So they either couldn't create a believable puppet or this CG character wasn't done well enough. But I couldn't get through that the first time. So then you said you saw it, and for some reason I respected your opinion. Shows you where we'll go at this point. So we watched it again. And it was a little bit better. For some reason, I kept thinking, and this isn't terribly fair to it or to Netflix, I guess, but boy, this isn't Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Why isn't it? And I think it's the money behind it. And for me, and this is probably overanalyzing it, but it didn't have the presence, the Pee-wee sensibility that I got from the first one, which was a combination of just kind of crazy antics, sound effects, and sound design. Ultimately, for me, it didn't sound like Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Silly music and goofy sound effects and things like that. He has, the silly laugh that we get a lot of times. So most of the elements are there. But for me, and I think I get the sense from you, this is clearly number 3 on the list. It still didn't match up to me, and I really kind of have to give a thumbs down or give this about a 4 on my scale, even as Pee-wee's. I thought it was really kind of, for me, a waste of my time, and I think happily back to Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
I may be more generous to it because of the environment in which I saw it.
Okay.
Like at the theater, they run a pre-show.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
And this was amazing. They ran an old silent movie from the silent era of a guy waking up in the morning and having all these Rube Goldberg devices in his bedroom, which was clearly a precursor to Pee-wee.
Right.
And they had dubbed music from this movie over that. And then they ran all these old Pee-wee TV appearances from the 80s, so you really got in the mood before the movie happened. And yeah, I wasn't completely in love with it the whole time, but I did laugh enough that I was happy with it. I'm not sure where I would place it.
It's so bright and colorful. Maybe this needs big screen treatment. I hadn't really thought of that either.
That might, and that's why maybe the setting in which I saw it, raised my appreciation of it that much. I mean, a lot of times it does feel a little bit on the cheap with various elements.
Right, but I think those are one of the things, even as I'm watching that, I'm thinking that, but that's not fair to criticize Pee-wee because that's what the Pee-wee's Playhouses were. Right. So there.
There. Take that and put it up the flagpole. So next week we have a whole bunch of films, which we're not going to tell you what they are because that way you'll tune in and you may win the sweepstakes. That might get them to tune in too. Until then, I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemanaics.